We are bringing you extensive coverage as we mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and we want to share with you a powerful moment. Canadian veterans back on Juno Beach. 13 Canadian Second World War veterans are in Normandy. 4 are veterans of D-Day. They are in their late 90s or older. You can see the emotion. As it has been every 5 years, this is a major commemoration. Canada, the UK, and the US are holding events. King Charles, Prince William, and world leaders are there. But like every D-Day commemoration, the ceremony is about the veterans' courage. The CBC's chief correspondent, Adrian Arsenault, spoke with some of them.
The first thing we saw was the contrails of the superforts going in to drop bombs on the landing beaches. So that would be about 4 to 5 in the morning, and the sun would continue to rise.
And so as you get closer to shore and it's your turn to go ashore, what was that like?
I was all nervous. I was all excited about this until the Germans opened fire, and then everything happened at once. It's just like a dream.
Was it slow like a dream?
No, fast. Everything was fast.
Our carriers got overflowed with water, and we had to swim. They always told you that when you hit the beach or something, there'd be 60% casualties. So you say, well, I'm going to be at 6 out of 10. I'm going to be one of the 4 that made it. I always thought of that. I'm going to be one of the 4.
I have 3 old pals who died that day, and it was really very extremely difficult for us who had to keep on fighting. And I keep pictures of all 3 of them. In fact, I have them on the walls of my office in my bedroom. All I can do is think of them from time to time, the pictures together with them, and think of how they died and what they died for.
Let's go back to New Brunswick now. Veterans Affairs Canada is hosting D-Day commemorations there for military families who weren't able to travel overseas. The CBC's Brett Ruskin joins us now from Moncton, where the ceremony is about to begin. Just tell us about what we expect to see there today, Brett.
Yeah, Andrew, so we're going to keep kind of chatting, talking about what we're going to see, and then we're going to see it. So take a look over my shoulder here. This is the Moncton Cenotaph, one of a couple of different cenotaphs, a couple of different venues for events that have been taking place over the last few days in the greater Moncton area. So we're a couple of minutes away from the beginning of this commemoration, the largest commemoration as part of this 80-year anniversary in Canada. So who do we expect at this commemoration? Well, first of all, veterans, a handful of veterans who were there on D-Day 80 years ago, who will be there and who will, as far as we know, at the end of this commemoration ceremony, be marching right past where I'm standing here, which is why I'm stationed in this spot, because there's another venue just down the way where there's going to be a further reception with more music and a few more speeches over there. So that's going to be quite an impactful moment to see these veterans and their caretakers, as well as the delegation who are going to be following them. Who's in that delegation? Well, we expect the Governor General of Canada, Mary Simon. I'm just going to glance back to see who we can see, because I noticed another member of the delegation, that was Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, who has now arrived. She was speaking with members of the Canadian Armed Forces, as well as veterans, retired members of the Canadian Armed Forces as well, who are in attendance here. And so we expect speeches from them, from those 2 officials at least. We also are going to see a tree planting ceremony that takes place within the hour span that this ceremony is likely going to take place, as well a plaque unveiling as part of the cenotaph installation there. And so that is what's going to be happening. You can see kind of the crowds gathered here. I mentioned it last hour when we spoke, or I suppose 20 minutes ago when we spoke, that for each one of these services, each one of these ceremonies that we've seen here in the greater Moncton area, well in advance of their start time, we've seen families gathering, families joining the audience to witness and to take in these ceremonies. And it has been not remarkable to see, but encouraging to see that there are families, kind of full families of all ages, arriving to commemorate and to honor the sacrifices made by Canadians 8 decades ago. Andrew.
As you were speaking there, Brett, sorry just to jump in, but as you were speaking there,
Sure.
we did see Melanie Joly, the Foreign Affairs Minister, interacting, having some conversations ahead of the ceremony. Who have you had a chance to speak with so far, Brett? You know, you've been there for a little while as people are coming in and things are getting set up. Have you had any interesting, interactions?
Sure. It's been great to speak with past serving members, people who have been, part of the Canadian Armed Forces, who have been also essential in organizing this. I mentioned kind of families of all ages. There's also participants of all ages. There is certainly members of the Canadian Armed Forces who actually arrived and marched through, but also there are some quite young cadets as well as musicians who will be performing and will be playing either here at this main ceremony or further down the way at the secondary venue, which is again just a short walk that way. But it's neat to see that it's such a multi-generational affair to have, again, from the very young to the veterans themselves who were there on D-Day. Jacqueline, Andrew?
And Brett, we noticed that the main ceremony is there where you are in Moncton. Dieppe is in the greater Moncton area. Of course, there's Dieppe, New Brunswick. There's a Dieppe, France. Tell us a little bit more about why this ceremony is special to the people there and why it is the main focus of the D-Day ceremony here in Canada today.
Sure. And I'm just listening in both ears, as you do, as everyone does. But they're announcing there's a few moments. People should gather their seats for the ceremony, so moments away from the ceremony. But when you mentioned the area, the Dieppe area, because this, when this venue was announced for Veterans Affairs Canada to host this series of ceremonies here, it was the Greater Moncton area, which kind of includes Dieppe, the city of Dieppe, formerly the town of Dieppe, that changed its name back in 1946. That was when the town got together and said, hey, it meant so much to us, it meant so much to Canada for the Dieppe raid, which was 1942. So a bit of a history lesson. We right now are commemorating 1944, June 6th. That was, again, the beginning of the Battle of Normandy. That was D-Day, where we saw that amphibious landing for those thousands of troops landing there on the beaches of Normandy. But 2 years before that, that was the Dieppe raid. Same idea with an amphibious assault on land, about 145, 160 kilometers, depending on how you measure it, up the coast at the port of Dieppe. So Canadians played an integral role in that amphibious assault as well. It was strategically, militarily unsuccessful. However, the lessons learned, the increases and changes to the logistics and the preparations that would be required for such an amphibious assault, such a huge movement of soldiers and military assets from sea to land, and to successfully enter a beachhead and to make advances inland against opposing forces. The lessons learned from that Dieppe raid were so essential to the success 2 years later of D-Day. And so the first ceremony that happened yesterday morning, was at the Dieppe Cenotaph, which is just a short drive from here in the city of Dieppe. And at that Dieppe Cenotaph, it is a brick cenotaph with some different colored bricks showing kind of an image of a soldier, perhaps holding a rifle. And then there's small pebbles, there's small stones in the mortar in that cenotaph. They don't quite match up with the brick, and so you research back as to what those pebbles are. They come directly from the beaches of Dieppe. They were gathered by school children there years ago, 913 stones that were picked up from the Dieppe beach, brought to Dieppe, New Brunswick, to be included in that cenotaph. Why 913? 913 Canadians died during that Dieppe raid. And so they are there, each one of those stones representing a Canadian life. They are sorted and categorized into 10 different groups, representing the 10 battalions that were as part of that raid. So all kinds of symbolism and history, not only in this community of Moncton, the community of Dieppe, but also in many small communities all across the country, because Canada really had such a key role in D-Day and in this offensive to, again, really turn the tides of World War II. So again, that's a history lesson going back to 1942. We are once again talking about 1944 now, and 80 years since D-Day, with the commemoration ceremony happening here in Moncton. Let me just take a look back to see if we're seeing the Governor General yet.
It could be any moment now, Brett. We're watching along with you as well. I wonder if maybe you could just walk us through again the timeline of events here, because the ceremony is going to start, but then, as you've mentioned, they're going to move to another area, Brett?
Yeah, so there's two areas here. This is Victoria Park, and if it's not clear from the beads of sweat on my head, it's a beautiful day. It's a sunny day here.
It looks beautiful.
For this type of event. So very blue skies, very green trees. It is incredibly picturesque, and the ceremony is going to be happening here, beginning here. So about an hour, kind of 55 minutes or so, is expected to happen here. Perhaps less. I'm just going back through the timeline in my head, but we expect a speech from Governor General Mary Simon. This is the only ceremony that she will be attending, so it'll be great to hear what she has to say. We've heard speeches from, we had the Lieutenant Governor of New Brunswick, who spoke last night at that sunset ceremony that we've been talking about a little bit. So it'll be interesting to hear what Canada's Governor General has to say on this 80th anniversary. We will also hear, as we mentioned, Melanie Joly is here, Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, so she will be making a speech. I think we have one or two other speeches, perhaps from members of the Canadian Armed Forces, but then there's going to be, at the cenotaph, the unveiling of a new plaque that presumably will be in honor of this 80th anniversary, as well as a tree planting. And I haven't quite situated or figured out where the tree planting is going to be. But I can also tell you, if you hear the buzzing, it's because there's a drone overhead. This is going to be kind of very well captured and coordinated. There is kind of camera crews here, camera crews as well over there. That second venue over there is going to be the area after the tree planting, after the plaque is unveiled, that there's going to be the delegation that's marching and walking this way. Certainly marching will be members of the Canadian Armed Forces currently, as well as veterans. So that handful of veterans who served on D-Day 80 years ago will be walking along this way. So there is this kind of fencing here, not necessarily for security purposes. There's gaps in it, but basically to allow space and allow kind of this kind of reverent moment to have this slow procession. There's 10 to 12 minutes built into the schedule of events for this procession of the veterans as well as their caretakers to make their way slowly, gradually to the other location, which is maybe 200 meters, 300 meters that way, followed by the delegation, followed by the Governor General, Mary Simon, followed by Melanie Joly, Minister of Foreign Affairs for Canada, as well as not only senior members of the Canadian Armed Forces, but also the numerous members of Canadian Armed Forces, kind of the bands that are here. There's younger cadets that are here as well. So quite an extensive showing. I'm not sure if we've been seeing kind of the wide shots behind the crowds here. What we can see behind me is members of the general public primarily. But there's quite an extensive, many different units of Forces members here in attendance as well.
Yeah, Brett, we are getting lots of different shots, some very nice, excuse me, moments. I'm just wondering, we've been talking about how it has been 80 years, that many of these veterans are in their late 90s or older. Has that added to, in your conversations, the poignancy, maybe the extra special element of this particular anniversary? There are few left. There are still some still with us, but there are fewer and fewer.
It adds to the importance, Andrew. It adds to the importance, ceremony after ceremony, certainly year after year, with fewer and fewer of these veterans, whether it be for Remembrance Day ceremonies or whether it be for more specifically D-Day ceremonies like this one. It's hard to know when the next major event or remembrance of D-Day will be, whether it be at the 85-year anniversary, whether it be at the 90-year anniversary, at which point we are going to have fewer voices to share the stories of that day, to share the warnings of that era, of the horrible parts of war and the effects of that on global lives and global communities. I'm just hearing that Canada's Governor General Mary Simon may be arriving shortly, so we can continue chatting, or Andrew and Jacqueline, we can move over to there.
Yeah, well, yep, she is arriving, so let's just watch and listen.
Good afternoon. Please be seated. Bonjour, veuillez vous asseoir. Veterans here present with us and those watching at home, Your Excellencies, Your Honor, parliamentarians, Ambassador, distinguished guests, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and members of the public, welcome. I'm Acting Sub-Lieutenant Pascal Guindon, and this afternoon I have the privilege of being your Master of Ceremony as we mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. Je suis l'enseigne de vaisseau de 2e classe Pascal Guindon, et cet après-midi, j'ai le privilège d'être votre maîtresse de cérémonie.
To be your Master of Ceremonies while we celebrate the 80th anniversary of D-Day and the Battle of Normandy.
I acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered this afternoon is the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples. As guests, we are honored to gather here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have and continue to take care of the rivers that sustain life, the trees that shade us, and the paths that connect us. Je rends hommage à tous les peuples des Premières Nations, les Inuits, les
I would
Métis,
like to thank
à leurs aînés,
all Indigenous
et à leurs
peoples
ancêtres. Et je reconnais leur
and their
précieuse
ancestors,
contribution
and I
passée,
recognize their precious
présente,
past and present contribution to these lands.
80 years ago this day, the Allied invasion of northern France, codenamed Operation Overlord, began. June 6, 1944 was D-Day, and it launched the Battle of Normandy during the Second World War to free Western Europe from Nazi occupation. This seaborne invasion across the English Channel was the largest naval, air, and land operation in human history, involving Allied troops from the United States, Britain, and Canada, simultaneously landing on 5 beaches in Normandy. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill called it, quote, the most difficult and complicated operation ever to take place. An estimated 15,000 Canadians participated in the landing force. They stormed Juno Beach under intense enemy fire and were able to progress further inland than any other Allied force on that day.
We are gathered here today to commemorate a pivotal moment in our common history, D-Day and the Battle of Normandy during the Second World War. On June the 6th, 1944, this marked the largest seaborne, naval, and terrestrial operation of the entire war, involving troops from the U.S. and British allies. With approximately 15,000 Canadians, they were able to make more progress than any other Allied force that day. The victory in the Normandy campaign was very costly. Thousands of Canadians made the ultimate sacrifice. Others came home with injuries to their bodies and to their souls.
The journey of these courageous Canadians did not begin on the shores of France, but rather right here in Canada. From farms and coastal communities to towns and cities, these young Canadians left their homes and families not knowing if they would ever return. Guided by a sense of duty and freedom, Canadian troops demonstrated remarkable bravery and determination in the face of fierce adversity to liberate Western Europe and ultimately achieve victory in Europe. Sadly, 359 Canadian soldiers were killed on D-Day alone, carrying out their duty. Today, we remember those who paid the ultimate sacrifice, and we recognize the service of all Canadian Armed Forces members of that campaign. Let us remember the courage of those who fought, the resilience of those who survived, and the legacy they left. Their memory lives on in the hearts of every Canadian.
Before continuing, I would like to highlight the presence of veterans from the Second World War here today. We are honored that you be with us today. Thank you for your presence, and thank you for having served our country and fought for freedom.
If you are able, please stand as the Canadian Armed Forces Band plays the National Anthem of Canada. S'il vous plaît, veuillez vous lever pour l'hymne national
If you
du
can, please
Canada,
rise
joué
for the
par la
National
musique
Anthem of Canada,
des Forces Armées
performed
canadiennes.
by the Canadian Armed Forces Band.
Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir. I now invite Chief Terry Richardson to welcome guests on the ancestral territory of the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples.
Gwe. Hello, bonjour. It's an honor to be here today. This is the last time I'll have to talk, so I know the gentleman will be happy to hear that after 3 or 4 days. But I've had the opportunity of spending 3 days with some extraordinary people. People who have given the ultimate sacrifice to us so that we can enjoy the freedom that we enjoy these days. So along those lines, there's 2 things I wanted to just mention here and talk about. And one is service. Service comes in many forms, and these veterans have set a standard for us to follow. But service is not only service in the military, but it's also service to our communities, service as in the policing, service in ambulance services, service to our communities in providing voluntary service. That's so important. So these gentlemen have set a standard for us to follow and for us to be able to continue as members in this great country of Canada that we have. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other is unifying. When you look at the Second World War, we had people from Chilliwack, British Columbia, to Shashashi, Labrador. Right across this great country, we had French, English, Aboriginal, we had Irish descent, Scottish descent, and they all came together to fight one common goal. And we can accomplish so much when we unify as a group of people in this great country of Canada. And that's what we have to do, is unify. Stop putting our petty differences aside and following the standard that these individuals have put before us, which is so important. They've set that standard for us to follow and enabling us to enjoy these great freedoms we have in this country we call Canada. Before I go, there's one group that I have to say thank you to, and that's to the Department of Veterans Affairs. They were able to actually put this all together, which is great. It's phenomenal. Nobody knows the amount of work and dedication that goes into organizing these type of events. And they did an extraordinary job of doing this. And I think they all deserve a super round of applause from everybody. So gentlemen, that was my last salvo. You won't have to hear from me again. It's been an honor and a privilege for the last 3 days to get to know each and one of you, to talk to you, to meet your families, to meet fellow veterans who have served this great country of Canada. Merci. Thank you. Walalan.
Yes, thank you, Chief Richardson. Walalan. I now invite Diane Petrie, Colonel Bruno Elouin, and Paul Peary to recite the Act of Remembrance in English, French, and Michif. Yes, madam.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not worry them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we shall remember them.
Ils ne vieilliront pas comme nous, qui leur avons survécu.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. As the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
I've got my copy here. Here we go. Je me rappelle, ils vivront pour qu'on nous autres. Ils sont pas avec Paris chouché. Quand il soleil sur et puis quand siève, avoir strappé 12 ans.
Thank you, merci. J'invite maintenant
I
maître
now
de première
invite
classe Oluwatun
Oluwatun Iloba
Ogunsola et maître
Ogunsola
de première classe
and
Marcus Reed
Marcus
à
Reed
réciter la promesse du souvenir
to recite
au nom
the
de la
commitment to
jeunesse
remember
du Canada.
on behalf of Youth of Canada.
They were young as we were young. They served, giving freely of themselves. To them we pledge amid the winds of time to carry their torch and never forget. We will remember them.
Ils étaient jeunes, jeunes comme nous. Ils ont servi donnant généreusement
They were young as we are young.
Nous
They
leur
served, giving
promettons
freely
en
of
dépit
themselves.
du temps qui
To them we
passe.
pledge amid the winds of
D'apporter
time
le flambeau
to carry
et de
their
jamais
torch
oublier.
and never
Nous nous
forget.
souviendrons
We
d'eux.
will remember them.
Thank you, merci. Au cours des prochaines minutes, vous
Over the next few minutes, you will hear the last post. This will be followed by a moment of silence, rouse, and the lament. During this time, a CH-149 fly past will take place. Dear guests, please rise for the last post.
For the playing of the last post. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir. We will now proceed with the laying of the wreaths. Au nom du peuple canadien,
On behalf of Canadians,
of the people of Canada, Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon. Au nom de la République française, on behalf of the French Republic, Son Excellence Michel Miraillet,
His Excellency
ambassadeur
Michel
de la France
Miraillet,
au Canada,
Ambassador
accompagné
of France
du
to Canada,
colonel
accompanied by Colonel
Éloy.
Bruno Éloy.
Au nom du gouvernement du
On
Nouveau-Brunswick,
behalf of the government
on
of New
behalf
Brunswick,
of the province of New Brunswick, the Honorable Mary Wilson, Minister of Service and Minister responsible for military affairs. Au nom d'anciens combattants Canada,
on behalf
on behalf of Veterans Affairs Canada and Associate Minister of National Defence, the Honourable Mélanie Joly. Au nom de la ville de Moncton, on behalf of the city of Moncton, Her Worship, Don Arnold. Au nom des Forces armées canadiennes, on behalf of the Canadian Armed Forces, Lieutenant General Jocelyn Paul. Au nom des vétérans autochtones, on behalf of Indigenous veterans, David Armitt. Au nom des vétérans de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, on behalf of veterans of the Second World War, Horace Byford. Au nom de la jeunesse canadienne, on behalf of the youth of Canada, Chief Warrant Officer Tolulope Iyoyo. now invite any others who wish to lay a wreath to do so. J'invite maintenant tous ceux qui souhaitent déposer une gerbe à le faire. Merci, thank you. As we remember, recognize, and honor those who served during D-Day and the Battle of Normandy, I invite Canadian Armed Forces Chaplain, Major Chris Van Buskirk, to lead us in a moment of reflection.
Cherished veterans, distinguished guests, cadets, Navy League, mesdames et messieurs, bonjour, good afternoon, Kwe. At this point on D-Day, Canadians were moving beyond Juno Beach to the villages, and the collection and treatment of casualties had been ongoing for hours. From the very beginning of the assault, hundreds needed help. 574 men of the 3rd Canadian Division were wounded, and 359 had been killed. Des centaines de personnes
Hundreds of people required help. 574 men from the 3rd Canadian Division were wounded, and 359 soldiers were killed.
In his book, The Scarlet Dawn, Padre Raymond Hickey of the North Shore New Brunswick Regiment described the efforts. It was a hard job, he wrote, to get the wounded on the stretchers and carry them to the shelter of the wall. I will never forget the courage of the stretcher bearers and first aid men that morning. I will always remember their bravery. They stayed on the open beach until we carried all the wounded we could to safety behind the wall and gave them what help we could. I invite you now into a moment of reflection through the words of this prayer, or according to your own beliefs in the silence of your heart. Ô Dieu de miséricorde et de compassion,
Dear God, Creator of all, as we gather today to remember the suffering and the sacrifice of that day, we are humbled by the price paid for our freedom.
God of mercy and compassion, Creator of all, whose Spirit fills the whole earth, as we gather to remember the suffering and the sacrifices made on this day, we are humbled by the price of our freedom. The lives lost, the blood shed, the bodies broken, the wasted potential, the spiritual trauma, the sorrow of families. Oh God, with an aching heart, you watched it all unfold. In fact, you were there in the chaos and there in the bloodshed. Oh Dieu, avec un cœur douloureux,
Dear God, with a heavy heart, you saw all of this. You were there in the chaos.
Et dans est là dans la fusion de sang. You were there to strengthen the living and to comfort the dying. Every soul was known to you and held by you in love, even though none of it was according to your plan. Ton amour s'est manifesté.
Your love was manifested in the altruistic actions and bravery of the rescuers.
Your love was known in the unselfish, courageous acts of the stretcher bearers and first aiders as they attended to the fallen amid the bullets and bomb blasts. Through them, we see your true way of peace. Oh God, help us to be like them. Help us who have received so much to be channels of your peace in this chaotic world. Amen. Merci, miigwech.
Thank you, Chaplain. Merci. If you are able, please rise for the royal anthem. Si vous le pouvez, veuillez vous lever pour l'interprétation de l'hymne royal. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir. Before we move towards the amphitheater behind me for part 2 of our event, in just a moment, I will invite the Honorable Mélanie Joly, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Government of Canada, to deliver remarks and help unveil the commemorative plaque and tree just to the right of me here in Victoria Park. Following the remarks from Minister Joly, I invite Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon, His Excellency Michel Miraillet, the Honourable Brenda L. Murphy, and other assembled dignitaries and our Second World War veterans in attendance to join in unveiling the plaque and the tree. Minister.
I'm here on behalf of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Veterans Affairs and MP for Moncton Dieppe, our beloved Ginette Petit-Bateller. They are in Normandy right now, and I'm convinced particularly Ginette would have loved to be here. Your Excellencies, Mrs. Simon, Mr. Fraser, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur Miraillet, Lieutenant Général Paul, Mayor Arnold, dear Dawn, Chief Richardson, Armit, Mr. Peary, Major Van Buskirk, Mrs. Pitre, Mr. Byford, Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Kay, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, veterans, families, friends. It is an honor to be present with you today on behalf of the Government of Canada to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. As we stand here today in the shadows of the Moncton cenotaph, we see the young Canadian soldier looking down at us with sadness. This statue represents each and every one of us, gathered here to solemnly remember the more than 5,000 Canadian soldiers who bravely fought and died on D-Day and in the months of bitter fighting that followed in Normandy. Some of them were members of the North Shore New Brunswick Regiment. Some were from here, the greater Moncton area. They were fathers, sons, brothers, neighbors, some merely teenagers. Le matin du 6 juin 1944,
The morning of June the 6th, 1944, they were part of the tens of thousands of Allied soldiers who stormed the beaches of Normandy, occupied by the Germans, and faced with a determined enemy, they managed to succeed. They were able to break through the wall of the Atlantic, to make headway into the grounds and liberate France.
Canadians would go on to play an important role in bitter struggles in other places like the Scheldt, Rhineland, and the Netherlands during the Allied offensives that would eventually help defeat the Germans and see victory in Europe Day declared in May 1945. But even 80 years later, it is what our troops did on D-Day and in Normandy that makes many Canadians think of first when asked about our country's most impressive military accomplishments. Today, we're privileged to welcome veterans of the D-Day landings and the Battle of Normandy. And I've had the chance to meet with them and talk with them, may it be Lord, Horace, Russell, George, and many more. Thank you for sharing your memories. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for being with us today. 80 years ago, you were among the more than 1 million Canadians who left their homes to fight for democracy during the Second World War and to liberate the oppressed from the forces of evil that threatened them. Aujourd'hui, vous faites partie des quelques personnes
you
de
are
cette
part
génération
of the
qui
few
sont
people
encore
from this
parmi nous.
generation still among us.
Pour beaucoup d'entre nous,
For many
vous êtes
of us,
des géants
you
de
are
l'histoire canadienne.
giants
Et même la distance
of
du
Canadian
temps,
history.
ni 80 ans, ni 90,
And
ni
even
100 ans,
time, 80 years, 100 years, this will never reduce the significance of your service to Canada and the significance for the
On
world.
behalf of a grateful nation, please accept our most profound appreciation for your service and sacrifice in the cause of peace and freedom during the Second World War. Canada is what it is today because of the service and sacrifice of you and your fallen comrades. And we are forever in your debt. Today, we found ourselves amidst an international security crisis. War has broken out in Europe, in Africa, and in the Middle East. Tensions have risen in the Indo-Pacific. Les plaques tectoniques de l'ordre mondial
The
bougent
tectonic
sous nos
plates
pieds.
of the world order are
Global powers
shifting.
are disrupting the very peace that Canadians fought and gave their lives for. At a time of global uncertainty, we must vigorously defend our values of democracy, freedom, and peace for the next generation of Canadians so they can enjoy the same security and prosperity given to us by those who fought so hard for our freedom. We will draw our strength from those who have served in the past and those serving today. And we'll continue to draw strength from those who will serve for years to come. Today, in their honor, we pay tribute to the brave Canadian heroes who sacrificed and gave their lives so that we could live free. Lest we forget. Merci.
So I now invite Her Excellency, the Right Honourable
Maintenant.
Mary Simon, His Excellency Michel Miraillet, the Honourable Brenda L. Murphy, our assembled dignitaries, and our Second World War veterans in attendance to join us over here in unveiling the plaque and the tree. right. So with that unveiling, now I would ask everyone to return to their seats. No? Okay, we're going to take a photo first, and then we'll have everyone come back to their seat.
You know him, do you? Oh, yeah. Where are you? There you go. You want to well, you listen to me. My son there is... Hey, Michael, I'll give you the roll for...
All right, thank you to all. Merci à vous. This concludes the commemorative portion of our event today. Cela met fin à la partie commémorative de notre événement d'aujourd'hui. J'invite nos vétérans, dignitaires,
This ends the commemorative portion. I would like to invite everyone to the amphitheater for the third part of our event. It will include musical presentations by Systema New Brunswick and the readings of letters of young people in the region to our veterans of the Second World War here today. We will also have a special presentation by Michel Mireillet, Ambassador of France to Canada, that you don't want to miss.
L'escadron de cadets de l'aviation royale du Canada 101 Moncton nous dirigera vers l'amphithéâtre.
We will have an escort to the amphitheater for the second part of the ceremony.
Moncton Royal Canadian Air Cadet Squadron, who will lead us to the amphitheater. See you there.
We've been watching a live ceremony in Moncton, New Brunswick, celebrating the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And we're going to go to our reporter on the ground there, CBC's Brett Ruskin, as this procession moves past him. Brett, tell us about what you've been seeing from your vantage point.
Well, Jacqueline, if you can hear me, the band is going past here. And so here come the veterans. I'm going to step aside so we can see them, and I'll list them by name. We have, again, veterans from D-Day. Russell Kay, we have George Ferguson, and we have Horace Byford. Again, they served as they come through. They served 80 years ago on D-Day. This is the procession that we're watching here from the two different venues that make up this commemoration ceremony. We saw, here comes two more of them here. We saw the speeches and the tree planting that took place there at the first venue as we watched the veterans come through along this procession, connecting one part of the venue to the other as they make their way. We can see the ambassador to France, Michel Mireillet, Ambassador of France to Canada, who is there. Here comes Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, Governor General Mary Simon as well, and the rest of the procession that's making their way this way. Now, speaking of Melanie Joly, who was speaking, she, in her remarks, said that Canada is what it is today because of the sacrifices made 80 years ago. So thanking the veterans, honoring the veterans, those who sacrificed their lives, those who are still alive today and who made those sacrifices 80 years ago on those beaches of France. Now, she also added, pivoted, and said that there is once again war in Europe. There is once again war in Africa and in the Middle East as we speak. So she was very clear that we should globally try to rid ourselves of war, but that war is once again upon us in so many different major regions of the world. Now, before that, we actually heard from Canadian Armed Forces members as well, and we have a short clip, a short snippet to kind of recap what we heard from a couple of them. Here's again what they had to say about Canada's involvement again in D-Day 80 years ago.
An estimated 15,000 Canadians participated in the landing force. They stormed Juno Beach under intense enemy fire and were able to progress further inland than any other Allied force on that day.
From the very beginning of the assault, hundreds needed help. 574 men of the 3rd Canadian Division were wounded, and 359 had been killed.
And so again, that was members of the Canadian Armed Forces who had made presentations, had made speeches. The rest of the delegations are now making their way through here, making that walk down again to the second venue of this commemoration ceremony. We saw that tree planted. That was actually, we're told, a European hornbeam. That is the name of the tree. It is native to Europe, specifically native to France. So that is suitable on a day like today when we are honoring the sacrifices made on those beaches of France. So again, that was the tree planting that took place. That was the plaque that was unveiled as another part of the Moncton Cenotaph here in Moncton, one of the many different commemoration ceremonies that have been happening in the greater Moncton area over the last few days.
Yeah, some powerful reminders there, Brett, of the roles that Canadians played. You mentioned a few of the speeches that we've heard so far. What will we be seeing and hearing next?
Sure. Well, we're going to be hearing from, there is a youth orchestra who performed at a previous ceremony last night and who are once again going to be performing again soon, as again more members of Canadian Armed Forces leadership now making their way through this procession. So they're heading to the amphitheater. So the amphitheater is kind of part of the park there, but there is a large stage set up. There is many kind of chairs and areas for people to watch, and there were lots of people watching last night, and there's already people gathered that way as well. So again, I mentioned last night there was a sunset ceremony that took place at the same park, at the same venue that people are going to right now. Yesterday it was in reverse. It started there and then went to this area with a kind of a smaller procession with provincial officials last night, but there's members of the RCMP who are making their way through as well. There, I mentioned the youth orchestra that are going to be doing a performance. Is going to be other members of military musical groups who are going to be performing as well. More of a reception there with a few more speeches expected and likely a shorter ceremony compared to what we just saw, and less formal of a ceremony, no less important, because it is all to honor the sacrifices made by, again, those three men, those three veterans who we saw march through, and everyone, all of the Canadians and from every country who made the sacrifice 80 years ago. But it is going to be slightly less formal. So we saw the last post, the moment of silence at this part of the ceremony that took place here at this venue. It was going to be a little bit more relaxed at this secondary venue. Jacqueline, Andrew.
Brett, when you think about the age of some of these veterans that are participating in this today, I thought it was quite striking to see the youth taking part as well, some young people reading, but also helping to raise the flag. There seemed to be a participation of this, contrast there in terms of age. And you mentioned families were in attendance as well. What stood out to you about the range of people that are there today?
We should mention the youth, but we should also mention the youthful veterans, because at one point, I'm not sure if the cameras saw it, but it was one of the veterans, I'm not sure if it was Russell or George or Horace, but jumped up and said, "I want to take a picture with you too." But just like the amount of energy that these veterans still have, again, 80 years beyond what we saw happen on D-Day, and they would have been however old they were when they stormed those beaches of Normandy, still energy and positivity in those bodies, in those minds, in those souls of those men. And so, yes, youthful energy with those veterans, but also youth, as you mentioned, youth participating in this ceremony here, youth that are going to be participating as well in the second part of the ceremony there as well, with, again, this part of the ceremony now dissolving and breaking away. So different members of the Canadian Armed Forces are breaking away. Some of those younger cadet groups, there's some young people who are going to be making their way here as well. But yeah, it has been a wide range of ages, from kind of very old, at least in their 80s and 90s, down to young people. So even kind of beyond what the cameras could see, there were a few people deep, the families who were waiting and watching and listening to the words spoken, to the sentiment of this ceremony. And that's something that we've seen over the last couple of ceremonies. So again, I mentioned there was a ceremony last night around 8 o'clock p.m. There was a ceremony yesterday morning around 10 o'clock a.m. over at the Dieppe Cenotaph. And again, same thing with lots of families at this ceremony here as well.
Yeah, when you think about there being fewer veterans year after year, Brett, the possibility that some of these younger people who are there and taking it all in are able to carry on those memories. Brett, we'll leave it there. That's Brett Ruskin in Moncton, and the event is continuing, so let's continue to listen in.
Mary Simon to deliver remarks. J'invite Son Excellence, la très
I will
honorable Mary
invite Her
Simon,
Excellency, the Right Honorable Mary Simon, to deliver remarks.
Good afternoon. Bonjour.
Good afternoon.
Minister, I think she's departed. Ambassador, Indigenous leaders, veterans, and members of the Canadian Armed Forces. Dear guests, before I begin, let me thank Chief Richardson and others for welcoming us to the traditional territory of the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, and Beskodo-Magadi peoples. It's important to know the full history of Canada, which shows respect for the First Peoples of this land. There's
so much to learn from everyone's history, the history of First Nations, their experiences. I hope that we will take the time to listen.
I am honored to be here in New Brunswick to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. Throughout
the country, Canadians are celebrating this historic date. We all understand the importance of this moment in our history.
As Commander-in-Chief, I thank the veterans with us today, as well as every serving member of the Canadian Armed Forces. I would also like to honor those who are no longer with us, those who stormed the beaches of Normandy and those who sacrificed their lives in the name of freedom.
We remember the youth who fought valiantly 80 years ago.
We remember the soldiers from Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, and many other nations who stood shoulder to shoulder. They were bound by a common cause, and their determination and resilience changed the course of history. We remember this day, 80 years ago, on that 80-kilometer stretch of the Normandy coast that so clearly represented our resolve as allies to fight for freedom. We remember because so many lives were lost and so many others came home with injuries, both physical and mental. We remember because this is an important part of our history. Nous devons tirer des leçons du passé.
We have to learn from the past.
We honor every veteran when we strive towards dialogue, understanding, and peace. Since the Second World War, we have worked to achieve these goals. We have seen great progress, but we are not there yet. Le jour J nous a enseigné
D-Day has taught us many lessons.
The soldiers represented different cultures, languages, and traditions. This diversity was instrumental in D-Day's ultimate success. The Allies needed different perspectives, skills, and experiences to succeed. They needed the contributions of people from all walks of life, including Indigenous peoples, racialized communities, and immigrants. Pendant la bataille de Normandy,
During the Battle of Normandy,
nous avons constaté la
we
force
saw
de notre diversité.
the strength of our diversity.
Take that lesson and extend it beyond the battlefield. There is a struggle for equality and inclusion still happening in Canada and beyond. Let us create not only a peaceful world, but also one where every voice is accepted and celebrated, and where everyone can thrive. Nous avons tous la responsabilité
We all have the responsibility to transmit these stories and these lessons.
It also falls to each of us to pass on the importance of remembrance to the next generation. I know we will take this responsibility seriously. To our veterans and their families, now and always, we will continue to say thank you from a grateful country. We will remember them. Nous nous souviendrons
We
d'eux.
will remember
Thank
them.
you, merci, Nakormik.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Merci, Votre Excellence. I now invite members of Elsipogtog First Nation to the stage for a special tribute performance for our veterans.
Thank you very much. Beautiful day, beautiful ceremony. We give thanks to the veterans. Thank you for your services. Our last song for the day will be our Mi'kmaq honor song, honoring all the spirits that has gone. Thank you. Master. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour cette belle
Thank you
présentation.
very much for this beautiful
J'ai
presentation.
maintenant le privilège
I now have the
d'inviter
privilege to
Son Excellence
invite His Excellency Michel
ambassadeur
Miraillet,
de France au Canada,
Ambassador
à prendre la parole.
of France to Canada,
Son
to
Excellence
speak.
sera accompagné sur
He will be
scène
accompanied
des vétérans de
by
la Seconde
veterans
Guerre
from the
mondiale,
Second World War,
Russell Kay,
Russell Kay,
George Ferguson
et
Horace Byford,
and Horace
pour une
Byford
présentation
for
spéciale.
a very special presentation.
Your Excellency, Madame la Gouverneure Générale, Messieurs les officiers généraux,
officers,
dear veterans, dear friends, nous voici tous réunis cet
we are
après-midi
gathered here this afternoon for a ceremony that reflects the deep meaning that
et le Canada cette année 2024.
has the 2024 for France and Canada. We're celebrating the 80th anniversary of D-Day. The history of the relationship between France and Canada is long and varied. It's diverse. So naturally, it's a joining of our language and our common values, but also that of war. And also the 20th century and both world wars. And we see the faces and the souvenirs of the 650,000 Canadians who came to France during the First World War. 66,000 did not come back, and the 42,000 fell during the Second World War.
The military unit's strength is determined first and foremost by the cohesion among its members, the capacity of each person to accept the risk of having to make the ultimate sacrifice for a cause that is often much larger than the group. L'accomplissement d'une mission qui pour certains aujourd'hui
who, for many people, seems outside of the bounds of sense. In Vimy, 1917, on the beaches of Normandy in 1942, and Juno Beach on June the 6th, 1944.
14,000 Canadians who stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. More than 5,000 fell in battle. These soldiers who came to defend our values and to liberate France from Nazi tyranny now rest in this French soil that was so foreign to many of them. As we are doing it today, right here, they have once again been honored on the same beaches of Normandy, in the presence of heads of states and government, of course, but also, and just as importantly, by thousands of others from France and Canada, by our youth, side by side with Canadian veterans who have received the Legion of Honor, like over 1,300 of their peers, who also contributed to the liberation of my country. This evening, in just a few moments, I will have the honor of naming on behalf of the President of the French Republic to our national order 3 more veterans, Horace Byford, George Ferguson, and Russell Kay. Ces cérémonies sont pour la nation française, pour le peuple français, autant de moments d'émotion,
very emotional moments and moments of recognition.
Le vrai tombeau des morts, c'est le cœur des vivants. L'héroïsme de ces combattants force le respect et nous rappelle aujourd'hui plus que jamais à ce devoir sacré qu'est le devoir de mémoire.
The duty to remember, and to guide the next generations. We need to build a peace on these memories of the past. Our memories remind us that freedom is never definitively acquired, and that this always has to be defended. France has not forgotten, France does not forget, and France remembers. In the image of the Vimy monument, and to remember the exploits and the sacrifices that were made. A statue in recognition in Juno Beach was unveiled. We have monuments in Vimy, Beaumont-Hamel, and the youth will remember what France owes to Canada. When we speak about Beaumont-Hamel and the regiment coming from Newfoundland in 1916 in northern France, I would like to take this opportunity here in Moncton to remember the role played by the Acadian people and during the Normandy siege. Acadians who suffered the deportation, they've brought a major contribution to the Canadian Armed Forces in 1944, I think of the bravery of the North Shore Regiment from New Brunswick. It's important to not forget this sacrifice of the sons of Acadie.
Allows us to write the future. Our history must never be considered something that condemns us to following a certain path. It must instead inspire us, keep us alert, and enlighten us. Memory allows us to avoid repeating the errors and mistakes of the past, and friendship allows us to change course and make a difference. History, memory, and friendship, these are the things we have come together today to recognize and celebrate. To France, Canada is a special and precious ally. On both sides of the Atlantic, our monuments to those fallen in battle are a symbol recalling the sacrifices made in the name of those strong values that bring us together and for which we have never stopped fighting. Victor Hugo rappelait que si les morts sont les
Victor Hugo
invisibles,
said that if the dead are invisible, they are not absent.
if the dead are invisible, they are not absent. L'actualité en Europe, sur ce continent où ma génération et les suivantes
Europe,
considéraient il y a peu encore la guerre comme révolue,
We still
nous rappelle avec l'agression russe sur l'Ukraine.
see war. There is a Russian aggression on Ukraine, and we see the cost to defend our values. Faced with this conflict, Canada and France are united together with the same determination. This determination to act that we have, and we remember the dead and the shadows, and we know that individually and collectively we need to respect and defend the sacrifices in our democracies.
In 2014, France began a special campaign of recognition awarding the Legion of Honor, our highest order of merit, created by Emperor Napoleon in 1802, to Canadian veterans. With the assistance of Veteran Affairs, I would like to thank again, to which I extend heartfelt thanks. We have been able to identify and honor more than 1,300 Canadian veterans to date. 3 of them are here with us on this very special day, and I'm deeply honored to have the opportunity to present them with their awards. Horace Byford, you enlisted in the Canadian Armed Forces in Montreal in March 1943, having just turned 19. As an able seaman, you worked aboard several ships in the Atlantic Ocean from June 1943 to September 1945, including the HMCS Saint Laurent and the C-class destroyer Signet, which took part in missions to torpedo U-boats, a vital part of Operation Neptune in the days and hours leading up to D-Day. Horace Byford, au nom du président de la République et en vertu des gloires qui nous sont conférées, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Non, ça suffit. Oui, attendez une seconde. George Ferguson, you enlisted in the Canadian Armed Forces at the age of 18. As a soldier, you landed in France on July the 6th, 1944. Indeed, the fighting didn't stop on June 6th, that fateful day marking the beginning of the end for the Nazis. But you landed with the Regiment of Canada. Nec aspera terrent, and difficulties do not daunt, is the regiment motto. Wounded by shrapnel in Caen, a few days later you were evacuated to England and were unfortunately unable to take part in the rest of the fighting. Monsieur George Ferguson, au nom du président de la République et en vertu des pouvoirs qui nous sont conférés, nous vous faisons chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Russell Kay, you enlisted in the Canadian Armed Forces right here in Moncton in February 1942. You landed on Juno Beach on the 6th of June 1944, on the D-Day, as part of the first wave, which was the most deadly. I imagine you lost many brothers in arms. May their souls rest in peace. But you landed with the 12th Field Regiment of the Royal Canadian Artillery, which succeeded in eliminating a fortified German position and taking back the villages of Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer and Tailleville. Of all the Allied forces that landed on D-Day, the Canadian Army had the most success penetrating inland. For this invasion, the presence of a large number of bilingual soldiers within the regiment was a major asset, and what better place to evoke this symbol than here in Moncton, in the heart of Canada's only official bilingual province. The ability to speak French enabled them to quickly gain the confidence of their French counterparts and to obtain valuable information on the German forces in the region. You served until the end of the war. The Canadian Armed Forces had the honor of having you in their ranks until 1970. Président de la République et en vertu des gloires qui nous sont conférées, nous nous faisons chevaliers de la Légion d'honneur.
Merci beaucoup, Votre Excellence. Et bravo encore, Russell, George et Horace, les nouveaux Canadiens décorés de la Légion d'honneur. I now invite Sistema New Brunswick to perform their first musical piece of the afternoon, Hymn to Joy. Wow. What a beautiful performance. Thank you so much, Système New Brunswick. Merci. I now invite Master Corporal Alexander Ferguson and Sergeant Morgan LaRue, youth representatives and local cadets. They have prepared and will recite letters to the Second World War veterans here with us this afternoon. J'invite maintenant Caporal-Chef Alexander Ferguson et Sergent Morgan LaRue, les représentants des jeunes et les cadets de la région. Ils ont préparé des lettres qu'ils réciteront aux vétérans de la Seconde Guerre mondiale ici avec nous cet après-midi.
Chers vétérans et vétéranes de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, au nom des cadets de la Marine, je vous tiens à vous exprimer toute notre admiration et notre gratitude pour votre service exemplaire et votre courage indomptable pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale, en particulier lors du débarquement de Normandie, également connu sous le nom du jour J. Votre détermination, votre sacrifice et votre dévouement ont marqué l'histoire et ont ouvert la voie à la liberté que nous chérissons aujourd'hui. Autant que jeunes cadets, nous comprenons l'importance de votre héritage et votre contribution à la paix et la sécurité de notre pays. Le jour J symbolise non seulement un tournoi décisif dans la guerre, mais aussi la force collective, bravoure inérable de ceux qui nous ont combattus pour la liberté et la démocratie. Votre courage continue de nous inspirer et nous guider dans notre engagement envers le service, le leadership et le respect, des valeurs qui nous étaient transmises. Nous engageons à honorer votre héritage et en perpétuant les idées de dévouement, de responsabilité et de service envers notre communauté et notre pays. Votre sacrifice ne sera jamais oublié et nous continuerons à enforcer de mériter l'héritage de liberté que vous avez défendu avec tant de bravoure, avec toute notre admiration et respect. Merci.
Veterans, you are remembered by your brothers and sisters in arms, to family and friends, community members, teachers, and we the youth, we remember you. For the thousands who came off the ramps 80 years ago, on June 6, 1944, we have learned of your actions on that day, and we are on that fateful day, knowing that some of you were not much older than us. We will never forget that day, and hope that it will never have to be repeated again. You had the courage to help liberate France and the rest of Europe rest of Europe. For that, we believe that you deserve to enjoy a cold drink in your favorite spot or to be doing your favorite hobby. May you rest easy. We will carry the torch.
Thank you so much. Merci. Accueillons à nouveau Système Nouveau-Brunswick pour leur deuxième prestation, Ouverture solennelle 1812. performance by Sistema New Brunswick. Merci beaucoup. I now invite Her Worship, Don Arnold, Mayor of Moncton, to deliver remarks. J'invite Son Honneur Don Arnold, mairesse de Moncton, à prendre la parole.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi, tout le monde, et bienvenue. Welcome, Eps Gelasi. We are honored to have you join us today and honored that Moncton was chosen to host the 80th anniversary. Of course, we are also super proud to have the opportunity to show off our wonderful Sistema New Brunswick students. Aren't they amazing? Woohoo! Bienvenue à vous tous. Nous sommes fiers de vous accueillir pour cette importante commémoration et célébration. General Dwight Eisenhower, who was the Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, sent a message to Allied troops on D-Day in which he wrote, "The eyes of the world are upon you." Today, 80 years later, the eyes of the world are still upon you, our Second World War vets. Your achievement was so important, so significant, that it continues to be remembered and recognized. Votre arrivée en France a marqué le début de la fin de la guerre. Elle a offert une lueur d'espoir dans une période très sombre. Those of us who have grown up in peace cannot understand what it is like to live under the burden of war, to be afraid each moment, to not know if you will have shelter or food from one day to the next, to lose friends and family. Those who landed on D-Day, who fought in the Battle of Normandy and beyond, helped lift that burden off an entire continent. Il n'est pas étonnant que l'on continue à vous célébrer tant d'années plus tard. Vos réalisations ont été et sont remarquables. All of this was accomplished at great personal cost to each person who served, and with no guarantee that the war would end in their favor, with no guarantee that they would get to come home at the end of it. This is what courage and sacrifice looks like. So today we remember the fallen and also celebrate all those who stepped up to fight without counting the cost. Nous vous rendons hommage aujourd'hui et vous remercions pour votre service. May we remember your sacrifices and your courage, and may it inspire us all to never take our freedoms for granted and have the courage to also step up in the face of injustice. Merci beaucoup, Walallen.
Thank you, Mayor Arnold. Merci, Madame la Mairesse. We close our event with a final performance from Sistema New Brunswick. This next song was originally released in 1939 by Vera Lynn and became one of the most famous of the Second World War, expressing the sorrow of being apart from loved ones in wartime and the optimism of reuniting. Please welcome back the orchestra as they perform We'll Meet Again. Nous clôturons notre événement par une dernière prestation de Sistema Nouveau-Brunswick. Cette prochaine chanson a été lancée à l'origine en 1939 par Vera Lynn et est devenue l'une des plus célèbres de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, exprimant la tristesse d'être séparé de ses proches en temps de guerre et l'optimisme de les retrouver à nouveau. Voici l'orchestre qui interprétera We'll Meet Again. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Systema New Brunswick, for sharing your talents with us and providing the music for today's ceremony. Ceci conclut notre cérémonie. À toutes et à tous, je vous remercie de vous joindre à nous pour souligner cet anniversaire important. Ensemble, nous réaffirmons notre engagement à nous souvenir du courage de nos anciens combattants. Et j'espère que l'esprit de souvenir, de reconnaissance et de communauté que nous ressentons aujourd'hui nous accompagnera tous à l'avenir. This concludes our ceremony. Thank you all for joining us to mark this important anniversary. Together, we reaffirm our commitment to remembering the courage, hope, and spirit shown by the Canadians who served during D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. And now we leave you with these parting words from Vera Lynn. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Bonne journée, have a great day, thank you.
And what a beautiful sunny day and a performance by Systema New Brunswick, the young musicians playing that crowd pleaser, We Will Meet Again, as well as other performances. We have seen the Governor General as well speaking, saying that we will remember this day 80 years ago on that 80-kilometer stretch of the Normandy coast that so clearly represented our resolve as allies to fight for freedom. We will remember because so many lives were lost and so many others came home with injuries, both physical and mental. We will remember because this is an important part of our history. This is the main event in Canada commemorating, remembering that day 80 years ago when thousands of Canadians landed on D-Day, landed on Juno Beach, hundreds dying on this day. We also heard from the French ambassador who honored 3 more Second World War veterans who were there in attendance on this day. We heard Horace Byford honored, who enlisted in Montreal when he was just 19 years old. George Ferguson, also honored with the Légion d'honneur, the highest order of merit that France can bestow upon somebody. 18 years old when he enlisted and landed in France on June 6, 1944 with the Regiment of Canada. And then Russell Kay, a Canadian Air Forces member from Moncton, so from Moncton, New Brunswick, who landed on Juno Beach on this day 80 years ago as part of the first wave, the most deadly, but then that recognition from the French ambassador about the tremendous success that Canadian soldiers enjoyed on that day and in the weeks and months to follow. The CBC's Brett Ruskin joins us now from Moncton. So, Brett, just, tell us what you witnessed. But, I mean, it just had that, we could see towards the end there, those Second War veterans singing along to We Will Meet Again. It's such a spectacular day. Of course, we're remembering a very difficult, terrible day in this country's history, but it really did seem that people cherish this moment together.
Andrew, I'll bring you over in the audience kind of behind the scenes as to what we knew in advance, like everything about these 3 major ceremonies. There was this one, there was last night's, there was yesterday morning's as well. It was so regimented and so very, kind of everything was so well planned. The one thing that wasn't shared with the veterans, that was shared under embargo with the media, was that they would be receiving these awards, these honors, Légion d'honneur, or the Legion of Honor, which, as we heard, is the highest award given, merit award given to civilian, given to military in France. And I know you were just describing it, but it is given, and as we kind of heard, it was created by Napoleon back in 1802 as a way to not reward existing classes, existing kind of aristocrats or existing supporters of leadership. It was given for bravery and merit alone. And so as far as those qualities, showing bravery and merit, this is certainly these three individuals, again, Russell Kay, George Ferguson, and Horace Byford, they have all earned it indeed. So they didn't know that they were getting this award. Certainly they didn't know they were getting it from the ambassador of France to Canada. So what a great ceremony indeed. So if we want to perhaps recap a couple of the highlights that we've seen from this ceremony that has been many hours in length, from 2 different venues, many different angles, being able to be shared with Canadians and worldwide this ceremony. We heard from Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Melanie Joly. Here is what she had to say a little bit earlier in the day at this ceremony about this day, this 80-year anniversary.
At a time of global uncertainty, we must vigorously defend our values of democracy, freedom, and peace for the next generation of Canadians, so they can enjoy the same security and prosperity given to us by those who fought so hard for our freedom. We will draw our strength from those who have served in the past and those serving today.
Now, again, that was Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly speaking at the first venue of this commemoration ceremony. And then here we heard from Governor General Mary Simon. She was speaking again about the importance of everyone carrying forward this message of remembrance. Here's what the Governor General of Canada, Mary Simon, had to say earlier.
We remember this day 80 years ago, on that 80-kilometer stretch of the Normandy coast that so clearly represented our resolve as we remember because so many lives were lost and so many others came home with injuries, both physical and mental.
And again, Mary Simon continued on saying that the actions taken on that day and in the subsequent days and weeks of fighting in the Battle of Normandy changed the course of history. And that really is what this ceremony and the ceremonies that we saw overseas in France is all about, remembering and honoring the sacrifices made to change the course of history 80 years ago. Andrew.
Brett, thank you for your coverage today on this moving day. Appreciate this. That is the CBC's Brett Ruskin live in Moncton.
A lot went into D-Day before the Allied invasion even happened. Elsa Lessard was part of the Women's Royal Canadian Naval Service, known as the Wrens. About 700 women, including Lessard, were known as the Listeners. They spent hours listening